Hazer is a technology company, chemical engineering technology company, commercialising a process we call the Hazer process, a way of generating hydrogen and high quality synthetic graphite out of natural gas using iron ore as a process catalyst. So my background, I was one of the founders of Hazer. I've spent the last 15 to 20 years working in commercialisation of technology, in corporate finance and strategy. Before that, my background was in research chemistry. I've got a degree in chemistry and also a degree in law, and have spent a lot of time working in the finance space. So at the moment, the company has just moved out of a laboratory. We've just recently commissioned our first non-laboratory piece of equipment, what we call a pre-pilot plant. So having taken the technology away from a university laboratory environment and putting it out into the real world, where we can really see how the process works in real pieces of kit out in the real world. So the core of the technology is something called thermocatalytic methane decomposition, taking methane, which is the principal component of natural gas, and then heating that up in the presence of a catalyst so that that product decomposes and you end up with a carbon product and a hydrogen product at the same time. So the carbon comes out in the form of synthetic graphite, high quality, high crystallinity, high purity synthetic graphite that can go into a whole range of different graphite markets. And on top of that, we have hydrogen, which is an industrial gas used massively in a range of industrial chemical processes, but also really important in the future energy markets, because hydrogen can be used to generate electricity or generate power without any CO2 emissions. There are two key components of the hydrogen market. One is the use of hydrogen as an industrial chemical. And here we see it being used in making ammonia, being used in oil refining, being used in the plastics industry. A huge number of industrial processes use hydrogen as a feedstock that's typically made in large quantities as part of that process, and typically has a very significant CO2 footprint. So at the moment, when you make hydrogen, the principal industrial ways of making hydrogen release a massive amount of CO2. The second market in hydrogen is the hydrogen energy market, and we're seeing this now with vehicle fuels, a lot of what we call fuel cell electric vehicles, which are cars that run on hydrogen and therefore have no CO2 emissions because they're generating power using hydrogen. But in those markets, if you have a hydrogen product where you've made a lot of CO2 at the same time as you've made the hydrogen, you actually haven't solved the problem, you've actually just relocated it. It's much the same as running a battery electric vehicle if you run a Tesla or a battery powered car, but then you get your electricity from a coal-fired power station. So in the hydrogen energy space, there's an increasing demand for hydrogen with low or no CO2 footprint associated or being made at the same time as the hydrogen's being made. Similarly, in the graphite space, we have a graphite product. This can go into a huge number of applications. Graphite, again, is a commodity that goes into products like refractory bricks, heat-resistant bricks, brake linings, lubricants, but also very significantly, graphite is increasingly a big component of the battery market. And so we've done a lot of work with our graphite to demonstrate its use as an anode material. It's basically part of the material that makes up a battery. There's more graphite in a lithium-ion battery than there is lithium, and this is set to be the massive growth market for graphite going forward. So the key milestones from a technical perspective are the ongoing work around this pre-pilot plant. So the plant has now been commissioned, and we expect to have that up and fully operational by the end of this year, operating on what we call a continuous flow basis. So a continuous process where we can consistently add catalyst into the system and capture the graphite that's being made out of the system on an ongoing basis. We're also doing ongoing work with the use of the graphite, both in batteries and also in some of the other applications that we know graphite has very large applications and markets for. And we're also looking to develop the corporate side of the business. The company recently secured a significant investment from Mineral Resources Limited. They're a $2 billion mining services and mining company. And so we're keen to progress the commercial discussions with Mineral Resources Limited and with some of the other corporate partners that we've been in discussions with since we listed.